Right now, somewhere, someone is turning down an invitation. Not because they're sad, not because they're anxious, because they'd genuinely rather be alone. And if that sounds like you, you've probably been told to get out more, to be social, to stop isolating. Friends have joked that you're hiding. Family has worried you're withdrawing. But here's what almost nobody tells you. The way your brain processes solitude might not be a flaw at all. It might be a completely different operating system. One built for depth instead of speed, for reflection instead of constant stimulation. Today, we're breaking down 6 things people with this kind of mind love doing alone, and the psychology behind why your brain seems to run on its own frequency. Some of these will feel painfully familiar. Others might reframe habits you've quietly felt guilty about for years. Either way, by the end of this video, you'll understand something most people never take the time to explain to you. Solitude isn't something your brain settles for. For some minds, it's the exact condition they were designed to think best in. Before we start, understand this distinction because it changes everything that follows. Loving solitude isn't the same as loneliness. Loneliness is a painful gap between the connection you want and the connection you actually have. It feels like absence. Solitude, for a certain kind of brain, is the opposite. It's chosen, it's restorative, and it's where the nervous system finally exhales after being asked to perform all day. One drains you. The other refuels you. And confusing the two is exactly why so many people who love being alone have spent years assuming something was wrong with them. If you recognize yourself in even 3 of these 6 behaviors, stay until the end, because the 6th one ties every other point together and reveals the single trait underneath all of them. Let's get into it. 1. You replay conversations alone and analyze them like data. After a conversation ends, most people move on immediately, already thinking about the next thing on their schedule. You don't. Hours later, sometimes days later, you're still replaying it. Not out of anxiety, and not because you're fishing for something to worry about, but out of genuine curiosity. What did that pause actually mean? Why did their tone shift halfway through? What were they really saying underneath the words they chose? Psychologists describe this heightened tendency toward inward reflection as private self-consciousness, the habit of examining your own thoughts, reactions, and motives with a precision most people never bother applying to themselves. Brains wired this way tend to show stronger activity in what's known as the default mode network, the region responsible for introspection, memory integration, and meaning-making, and it stays active even when nothing external is happening at all. While other people's minds go quiet between events, yours keeps working, quietly cross-referencing the day's interactions for patterns. You're not overthinking, and you're certainly not broken. You're running a background process most people simply don't have installed, and it's the same process that makes you unusually good at reading people. 2. You do your best thinking with no one watching. Give you a room, a notebook, and silence, and ideas start moving on their own. Put you in a group brainstorm with people watching and waiting for you to speak, and something quietly shuts off. This isn't shyness, and it isn't a lack of ideas. It's cognitive load. Research on social facilitation shows that simply being observed by others activates evaluation apprehension, a subtle background fear of judgment that quietly eats up mental bandwidth even when you're not consciously aware it's happening. The brain starts monitoring how it looks instead of focusing fully on the problem in front of it. Remove the audience, and that bandwidth returns immediately to the task itself. There's no one to perform for, so every ounce of thinking goes toward actually thinking. Your brain isn't underperforming in groups, and it isn't antisocial for preferring to work alone. It's simply allocating full resources to a problem only when it's certain no one is silently scoring the outcome in real time. That's not a weakness in a meeting. That's a mind that refuses to waste effort on being watched. 3. You recharge through solitude, not deplete from it. For some people, an hour alone feels like punishment, something to be avoided or filled with a phone screen. For you, it feels like oxygen, the first real breath after a day of talking, adjusting, and reacting to other people. This distinction sits at the core of introversion research built on arousal theory. Introverted nervous systems tend to run at a higher baseline of internal stimulation, which means external noise, chatter, and social stimulation push them past their optimal threshold much faster than they would for someone else. Alone time isn't avoidance for this kind of brain, and it isn't a retreat from life. It's regulation, in the same way sleep regulates the body. Without it, focus phrase, patience shortens, and even small interactions start to feel heavier than they should. You're not antisocial, and you're not choosing isolation over people. You're recalibrating a system that simply reaches its limit sooner than others, and unlike a lot of people, you already know exactly how to reset it before it breaks down. 4. You get genuinely absorbed in one thing for hours. A book, a project, a hobby you've done 100 times before. And suddenly, 3 hours are gone, and you never noticed them passing. This is what psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi named flow, a state where self-consciousness disappears entirely and attention becomes fully absorbed in a single task, with no room left over for anything else, including time itself. It's considered one of the most satisfying states the human mind can enter, and it doesn't happen by accident. Flow requires something most environments simply don't offer: long stretches of uninterrupted, low distraction time. People who seek out solitude tend to enter flow far more easily than people who don't, because solitude removes the constant social monitoring that normally competes for attention in the background. Your brain isn't zoning out when this happens, and it isn't wasting time. It's operating at its most efficient, most focused setting, a setting that for most people requires being completely alone to switch on. 5. You prefer depth over small talk, even when you're alone with your thoughts. You'd rather sit with one real question for an hour than skim through 10 shallow ones in a group chat. Small talk doesn't just bore you, it actually drains you faster than a difficult conversation about something that matters. This reflects what researchers call need for cognition, a stable personality trait describing how much a person naturally enjoys effortful thinking rather than avoiding it whenever possible. Most people are wired to conserve mental effort. Your brain does the opposite. It seeks out complexity the way other people seek out comfort. People high in this trait often prefer solitary reflection precisely because it lets them follow an idea all the way down to its foundation, without the constant redirection, interruption, and small talk that group conversation almost always requires. It's not that you dislike people, and it's not that you're incapable of casual conversation. It's that your mind is built to chase depth wherever it leads, and depth, more often than not, needs quiet to actually be reached. 6. You feel most like yourself. When no one is around to perform for, this is the one that ties every single point on this list together. Social psychologists describe something called self-monitoring, the constant, mostly unconscious adjustment of behavior based on how others might perceive it in the moment. Some people self-monitor intensely, shifting their tone, posture, humor, and even their opinions depending on who's in the room. It's exhausting, even when it happens automatically, and most people never notice how much energy it costs them throughout an ordinary day. Others self-monitor far less, and alone is where that adjustment finally completely stops. If solitude feels like relief rather than absence for you, it likely means your sense of self was never built on an audience in the first place. You already know who you are without a mirror in the room to confirm it. That's not isolation, and it was never a phase to grow out of. That's psychological stability, the kind most people spend decades chasing without ever finding it. None of this means you should avoid people, and it doesn't mean connection isn't important. It simply means the way you recharge, focus, and understand yourself looks different from the loudest, most visible version of normal, and different was never the same thing as wrong. If you recognized yourself in 4, 5, or all 6 of these, you're not the person who needs to change. You're the person who finally needed the explanation. Tell us in the comments which one hit closest to home, and if there's a 7th thing you do alone that we didn't mention here. And if you want to keep understanding exactly how your mind works instead of guessing at it or comparing yourself to people whose brains simply don't run the same way, subscribe. Because we're just getting started decoding the psychology no one else is explaining.